Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. It is January 15th, the year of our Lord 2023. So, I've made a couple of videos talking about the city of Soledar, which is down here, as you can see here on the live UA map. Now, I think at least a week back, I was reporting that the Russians had taken control of the city. But, they were at that time still Ukrainian forces in the center making a stance, and there was also Ukrainian forces in the salt mines of the city, which are massive and fortified. But now we see multiple reports, even from Western media news sources and analysts, saying that it's very unlikely that there are any Ukrainian forces now in Soledar. Now, Soledar is a very strategic city in this region, as you can see here on the map, because it's to the north of Bakhmut, which is not too far away. And, the reason the Ukrainians were making a very serious stance there not to lose the city is because they knew that if Soledar fell, that would allow the Russians to attack Bakhmut, where there has been some ferocious fighting taking place. And, this would allow the Russians to attack from the north and from the south, as well as from the east here. So they could encircle the city, and if they chose to, play out a pincer maneuver here to pretty much trap Bakhmut just like they did with Soledar. Also, the fact that that the Russians have control of Soledar means that they won't be able to supply the forces there in Bakhmut as easily. Now, as happens with every war, the Ukrainians are trying to downplay the importance of Soledar, and now, since they see the writing on the wall, they're sort of trying to downplay the importance of Bakhmut, and they're trying to say that it's more so it's of symbolic importance rather than strategic, but that's not true. That's not what they were saying a couple of months ago. And the fact that they've been trying to not lose these cities shows you that, this is in fact very important strategically for both sides. As a matter of fact, last year, I believe it was in December, we saw Zelensky travel to the front lines here in Bakhmut. And then right after that, he made a trip to the United States to talk with the congressmen of the United States and pretty much, ask them for weapons so that they could resist the Russians. He took a flag with them, I believe, with like the signature of the soldiers or something like that, and gave it to Joe Biden. So the fact that Zelensky was here and right after flew to the United States shows you just how important it is, not only symbolically, but also strategically. Because once Bakhmut fails, once Bakhmut is conquered by the Russians or under the Russian control, then they will have to fall back here to the next major cities, which will be Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. But you can see that there's nothing here in between, so the Russians are going to be able to advance on this rather quickly once they choose to do so. Of course, we've seen that Russia is now starting to begin their missile wave attacks once again. So, since they took Soledar, I'm expecting that they are going to focus on Bakhmut here. We're probably going to get a lot more missile strikes here, and I'm guessing they are going to launch a pincer movement here to try to encircle Bakhmut. So here in the next couple of days, expect to see a major focus on Bakhmut. I'm sure that a lot of the reports that are going to be coming in are going to focus on Bakhmut, and I'm sure the Ukrainians are going to try to put up the best fight that they can, because even though they're trying to downplay Bakhmut's importance, it is very important and would be a major turning point in this region. But eventually, my prediction is that the Russians are going to take control of Bakhmut, and then the Ukrainian forces will have to collapse towards the west here. Also, this could coincide once the Russians take control of Bakhmut, Of course, their spirits are going to be high, as they are already, as I just covered in my previous video. Putin is very well pleased with the situation right now. So this could give way to the major offensive that's being rumored by Ukraine and by the Western allies. And so once they take Bakhmut, they could decide to launch a major offensive on the capital in Kiev. Also, we got to keep an eye out on Belarus up here, because if this major offensive comes after the fall of Bakhmut, we could see Russian forces entering Ukraine through Belarus, and potentially we could see Belarusian forces joining them. So that could potentially be the death blow that people are speculating about this year. The Western allies have been very slow in coming to a decision, to decide if they're going to send their best tanks to help Ukraine. We saw that Britain decided to send about 14 tanks, which isn't enough. Ukraine last year said they needed 300. So with all these Russian advances here, and as their focus is getting ready to switch over to Bakhmut here entirely, it's going to be very interesting to see what the Western powers decide to do. But anyways, let's take a look here from Al Jazeera and read a little bit about the situation here and their analysis here. Of course, they're talking about how the Russians will now focus on Bakhmut. So it says the battle for control of eastern Ukraine rages on, with Russian forces focusing on Bakhmut, a strategic city they have failed for months to conquer. Speaking to Al Jazeera in Bakhmut, and of course, Al Jazeera is sort of pro-Ukrainian, right? They're pro-Western. You can see here they say failed for months to conquer, but is it really a failure when they're still fighting there and they just conquered Soledar? I wouldn't word it that way. Speaking to Al Jazeera in Bakhmut, a soldier who identified himself as Sergei from Ukraine Special Forces said Russia has launched massive attacks by its ground forces against Kyiv's position in recent months. Quote, they send their troops like waves. We cannot stop them every time because we have fewer guys. And unfortunately, we lost a lot of men, end quote, said Sergei. Another Special Forces member named Gora added, quote, they split into small sub-units in order to avoid our artillery, and they infiltrate through residential areas and tree lines, but they also suffer huge casualties, end quote. Both sides have suffered heavy casualties in the battle for the city, with Moscow desperate to sell any win back home after repeated humiliations, and Ukraine determined to win back occupied territory. Of course, you can see by the phrasing of this, their biased shows, right? They obviously can't confirm any of this. All of these websites, whether they're Russian or Western, really can't confirm any of the numbers or anything. But usually when you're reading from a pro-Western news website, you'll see phrases like this, right? So it continues. Sizing nearby Soledar, a town of about 15 kilometers, 6 miles away, would help, or seizing nearby Soledar, which the Russians have. They have Soledar under control now, and it's very close, only 6 miles away from Bakhmut, would help Moscow's forces encircle Bakhmut and attack from a new direction in the north. Conflicting reports make the situation in Soledar unclear. Again, it's only conflicting because Ukraine keeps denying that they lost Soledar, but even Western analysts are saying that Soledar has in fact fallen to the Russians. As Russian officials say, the town has been captured, while Ukraine's leadership says fierce fighting is continuing. Described as one of the bloodiest campaigns of the war, Moscow's capture of Soledar would be a significant victory, which, again, they're victorious. They already took Soledar, following substantial battlefield setbacks throughout the second half of 2022. Soledar remains under control of our military, though there is street fighting and also fighting outside the city because the enemy is trying to advance in several directions. The enemy is incurring huge losses, Donetsk Governor Pavlo Kirilenko said in a video posted on the Telegram app on Saturday. Of course, he has to say that. What else is he going to say? More symbolic than strategic. Now we see the Western powers trying to downplay. Pretty much every time they lose a city, they downplay it. Every time they make a resistance, they exaggerate the importance. That's just the way war goes. Moscow has painted the battle for Soledar and Bakhmut as key to capturing the eastern region of the Donbass, which is true, encompassing the partially occupied Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Russia has said controlling those areas would help tie down the best Ukrainian soldiers and prevent them from launching counteroffensives elsewhere. That's why I'm saying once they take Bakhmut, guys, this could make way for this large offensive that the Russians are planning. But that cuts both ways, as Ukraine has said its fierce defense of the eastern strongholds has helped bog down Russian forces. Western officials and analysts have argued the two towns' importance is more symbolic than strategic, which is not what they were saying literally like 2 months ago when Zelensky went to the front lines. Analysts have said even if Russian forces were to seize Soledar, which they have, again, this report I believe is a day old, and they were still trying to downplay the situation there, nor would it seriously threaten Ukrainian troops in the region. Quote, such victory in Soledar is unlikely to presage an imminent Russian encirclement of Bakhmut, the U.S.-based Institute for the Study of War think tank said. Again, you can go look at the website of the Institute for the Study of War. They've been analyzing the situation in Ukraine since the beginning. They're very biased. A lot of their predictions are very pro-Ukrainian, and they've been wrong quite a lot in their predictions, underestimating the situation and over-exaggerating the victories of the Ukrainians. But even they just admitted that, as I covered in my previous video, that there is likely no Ukrainian forces now in Soledar. So once these guys, say something like that, you can bet, you can place a bet on it that it probably happened a couple of days ago. But yeah, they say that even though Russia has a victory in Soledar, notice the wording here, is unlikely to presage an imminent Russian encirclement of Bakhmut. They're not saying it's going to prevent or they're not going to encircle Bakhmut. They're saying that it won't be immediately, which I would agree. It's probably not going to be immediately like tomorrow, but within the next week or two, I think the Russians will make a move to encircle Bakhmut. Keep an eye out for that. Alexander Muzyenko, a Kyiv-based analyst, noted the fall of Soledar would not mean the Ukrainian defense line or front have collapsed, and that it would be necessary to fall back to new defensive lines. Yes. Soledar is located in Ukraine's Donetsk region, which Moscow unilaterally claimed to have annexed in September, despite only occupying part of the area. The capture of the region is widely seen as a key Kremlin war objective. But Kyiv and the West have played down Soledar's significance, now that they lost it, saying Moscow sacrificed wave upon wave of soldiers and mercenaries in a pointless fight for a bombed-out wasteland. Okay, again, they keep saying that they're killing a whole bunch of Russian soldiers, but they're not denying that the Russians are advancing and taking these cities over, which is really the thing you want to worry about. You don't want to worry about figures, which you can't trust because figures from both sides are unverifiable, at least, by me and you. But yeah, guys, you're going to be seeing a lot more news here, probably from me and other YouTubers and even the mainstream media talking about Bakhmut, because since Soledar is now under Russian control, even as you can see here by this pro-Western live UA map, they're now going to focus on Bakhmut. Now, here's my prediction. They're going to attack Bakhmut from the north, from the east, from the south. They're going to encircle it. The West and Ukraine is going to downplay it. Bakhmut will fall to the Russians, just as Soledar did. And then I believe the forces are going to have to fall back here to Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. Now, the whole objective here, according to what we just read, is that the Russians believe once they take control of Bakhmut and this whole area, it will prevent any sort of offensive or plans for an offensive from Ukraine. So what I think will happen after this is that they're going to get ready and make way for a large offensive aimed at the capital of Ukraine, which is Kiev or Kiev, however you want to pronounce it. Now, the question will be, will the Russians attack through Belarus as they did at the beginning of the war? And will they go, all in this new offensive? Because it would be embarrassing if they launch a large offensive and it fails like it did at the beginning of the war. But I think with this one, things are in a different state. And I think this could potentially be the death blow for Ukraine here. I'll make some videos because Germany just said that they're not going to be able to send their Leopard tanks till next year. So they pretty much are giving up on Ukraine. But I'll make another video on that shortly. Anyways, that seems to be the situation, guys. Russia is now going to focus big time here on Bakhmut, so expect more news reports on that. And remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and God bless you.